The bus rolled gently onto the main street of Raytown, and I got off, relieved. Home. 2 months away from my daughter was too long, no matter how much I loved Prudence and her family. At 67, I longed for familiar surroundings, my own bed and the peace of my own kitchen. "Here we are, ma'am." The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I slowly rose from the seat, feeling my knees ache from the hours-long drive. It was an unpleasant reminder of my age. Carefully, I pulled my small suitcase from the rack. When I was younger, a backpack would have sufficed, but now I preferred things on wheels. Practicality over pride. Raytown had hardly changed in the 2 months I'd been gone. Still the same neat little houses on Main Street, the same well-stocked grocery store on the corner where I did my shopping on Tuesdays, senior discount day, the same dusty park where mothers pushed their children in strollers. I noticed I hadn't seen my sister-in-law Doris and my granddaughter Lily among them for a while. The taxi took me to my small but cozy house on Elm Street. George, my late husband, had bought it 35 years ago when our children were still very young. "It's an investment in the future, Evelyn," he had said back then. George always thought ahead. He would have approved of the way I managed our finances after his death. The house greeted me with coolness and a slight smell of dust. I opened the windows and let the May air in. I checked the answering machine. 2 messages. The first from Monica from the book club, an invitation to a meeting next Wednesday. The second from the bank, the usual confirmation that the monthly payment for my son's mortgage had been successfully processed. These payments had been a fixture in my life for the last 5 years. After Frank lost a good position at an insurance company in a regional center and took a job as an adjuster in a local branch at half the salary, his family had fallen on hard times. Their move to Raytown was a forced step. "Just temporary, Mom, until I get back on my feet," my son promised. I had just buried George and felt lost alone in the huge house. Having my son's family around me seemed like a good idea. I had helped with the down payment for their house and now paid 2/3 of the mortgage payment every month. Frank insisted it was a loan that he would surely pay back. I didn't need the money. George's pension, insurance, and our investments over the years allowed me to live comfortably. I was glad for the opportunity to help. After unpacking and showering, I decided not to put off visiting my son. Sure, we had called each other during my absence, but I missed Lily. At 6, she was a quiet, thoughtful child, very different from Doris's loud, active children from her first marriage, 14-year-old Lars and 12-year-old Melissa. Frank's house was a 10-minute walk from mine. It was 2-story with a small yard, modest but nice. I noticed the lawn hadn't been mowed in ages, and the flower beds by the entrance were overgrown with weeds. Frank had once been proud of his garden and spent every weekend there. I knocked on the door and listened to the sounds inside. The TV was on at full volume. A game show, I think. Doris opened the door, and her face froze for a moment before widening into a smile. "Evelyn, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you today." She fixed her hair and adjusted a homemade-looking t-shirt. "I decided not to warn you," I replied, smiling. "I got back a few hours ago and wanted to see you all." Sure, come in." Doris stepped aside to let me into the house. "The kids will be happy to see you. Lars, Melissa, Grandma Evelyn is here." I noticed Lily's name hadn't been mentioned in that call. The living room was a mess. The sofa cushions were crumpled, empty chip bags and soda cans on the coffee table. The TV was blaring so loudly you had to strain to hear the words. Lars, a tall teenager with headphones around his neck, reluctantly looked up from his tablet. "Hi, Grandma." He barely glanced at me and went back to staring at the screen. Melissa ran in from the kitchen, chewing on something. "Grandma!" She jumped on me and hugged me. "Did you bring anything from your trip?" A typical question. I was used to Doris's kids seeing me as a source of gifts. "Of course, sweetheart. I left my bag at home, but I'll definitely bring something next time." I stroked her head. "Where's Lily?" "She's upstairs doing homework," Doris answered quickly, turning down the TV volume. "Frank is still at work, should be back in an hour. Would you like some tea?" I nodded and followed my daughter-in-law into the kitchen, noticing that it looked a bit different than I remembered. A new coffee machine, an expensive microwave. Not that I was counting my son's money, but these purchases were outside their planned budget. "How's Prudence?" Doris asked, turning on the kettle. "And how do you like it in New Haven?" "Prudence is fine. She's busy with her gallery, and the city is nice, although a bit too loud for me." I I sat down at the table. How is Lily doing in school? Doris's face tensed for a moment. Fine, she shrugged. The teacher says she's too quiet, doesn't interact much with the other kids. We're thinking of sending her to a child psychologist. Maybe she just needs more attention at home, I suggested carefully. We give her plenty of attention, Evelyn, Doris retorted coolly. But we have 3 kids, and Lily isn't the only one who needs attention. Lars is going through a difficult adolescence, and Melissa has a swim meet in 2 weeks. I noticed that Doris always drew a clear line between her children and Lily in conversation. Of course, I understand. I nodded, deciding not to press the issue. How's Frank doing at work? Better. Doris placed a cup of tea in front of me. He got promoted to senior adjuster. His salary hasn't changed much yet, but he says he's getting a substantial raise by the end of the year. I had heard that phrase for years. By the end of the year. Soon. Before long. In the meantime, my money was still flowing into their house payment. That's great. I sipped my tea. Can I go up and say hi to Lily? You don't want to distract her from her homework, do you? Doris said quickly. She got a bad grade in math recently, so she's catching up now. Better wait until after dinner. She'll be down then. Something in her tone made me suspicious. Lily was usually a straight A student, and since when could a 6-year-old not be interrupted for 5 minutes to say hello to her grandmother? We went into the living room, where Doris began to tidy up her scattered belongings. Sorry for the mess. The kids were especially active today. She laughed nervously. Lars, take your headphones off the table. The teenager rolled his eyes but obeyed. I noticed some new pictures on the shelf. Doris and the kids at a resort, Lars with his new bike, Melissa in her swimsuit with her medal, Frank and Doris in front of a yacht. Nice pictures, I remarked. When did you vacation at the coast? Oh, that was in March during spring break. Doris looked a bit embarrassed. It was just a 4-day trip and a last-minute deal. I nodded without showing surprise. In March, Frank had called me and asked for an extra $2,000 for roof repairs. Apparently, roof repair now meant a last-minute trip to the coast. Where are the pictures of Lily? I asked, as I didn't see my granddaughter in any of the photos. She was at my mother's, Doris replied hastily. She was just getting over a cold. We didn't want to take any risks. Or didn't want to spend money on another ticket, I thought, but said nothing. Just then, quiet footsteps were heard from upstairs, and a small figure appeared on the stairs. Lily, in a simple t-shirt and jeans, carefully descended, holding onto the railing. Grandma! Her eyes widened when she saw me. Lily, I told you not to come down until you finished your homework, Doris said sharply. The girl froze on the bottom step, her thin shoulders tensed. I quickly stood up and approached my granddaughter. Come here, darling. I've missed you so much. Lily rushed to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. I could feel her trembling and I hugged her tighter. You've grown, I smiled, pulling back to get a better look at her. And your hair has gotten longer. Lily smiled shyly, tugging at her blonde braid. How long are you staying, Grandma? I'm back for good, sweetheart. We'll see each other often now. Lily, you really need to finish your homework, Doris interjected, giving me an apologetic look. I'm sorry, Evelyn, but she has a test tomorrow. I'm almost done, Mom, Lily said quietly. Almost doesn't mean finished, Doris cut her off. Now, upstairs. I noticed the change in my granddaughter's face, as if a mask had fallen, extinguishing the recent joy. She nodded obediently and turned toward the stairs. I'll be right with you, I called after her. Doris's lips tightened in frustration, but she said nothing. I'll help her with her math, I explained, smiling. I'm a former accountant, after all. As you wish, Doris shrugged. I'm making dinner now. Are you staying, if you don't mind? As my daughter-in-law disappeared into the kitchen, I went up the stairs to the second floor. Lily's room was at the end of the hall, the smallest in the house, as I remembered. I knocked gently. Come in, a quiet voice came. I stopped at the open kitchen window, becoming an unwitting witness to the scene inside. Frank loomed over Lily, his face red with anger. My granddaughter's petite figure shrank back, shoulders slumped, head bowed. The kitchen table was indeed a mess, scattered cereal, empty glasses, crumbs, nothing that deserved such a tone. Lars and Melissa stood in the doorway, watching with unconcealed amusement. "Look, she's gonna cry," Melissa giggled, nudging her brother with her elbow. "She always does." Lars rolled his eyes. "The little crybaby." Frank didn't even turn around to admonish them. Instead, he grabbed a rag and thrust it into Lily's hands. "I want this place clean in 10 minutes, or no cartoons for a week." Lily nodded. Her small fingers clutched the rag. I noticed she was biting her lip, a sure sign she was holding back tears. Something snapped inside me. This man, yelling at a defenseless child, was not the son I had raised. George had never raised his voice at our children, even when they truly deserved to be punished. I walked decisively to the front door and knocked. Lars opened it. His face changed instantly when he saw me. "Grandma's here," he called over his shoulder, and I could hear the warning in his voice. Frank appeared in the hallway, instantly transformed. The anger was gone from his face, replaced by a welcoming smile. "Mom, what a surprise. Come in. We were just about to have breakfast." I stepped inside and looked around. The living room was relatively tidy, but I could see the signs of a hasty cleanup. The cushions were arranged unevenly, the magazines messily stacked. "I brought something for Lily," I said, holding up the book bag. "Where is she?" "In the kitchen helping clean up," Frank replied casually. "You know, we're teaching her responsibility. Kids need to understand that everyone in the house has responsibilities." "What are Lars and Melissa's responsibilities?" I asked, walking into the kitchen. Frank hesitated. "They have other things, school, extracurricular activities. Lily is still young, so it's good for her to help around the house." I fell silent as I entered the kitchen. Lily was standing on a small stool, just tall enough to reach the counter, wiping it diligently. When she saw me, she froze, a mixture of joy and worry on her face. "Grandma!" She jumped off the stool and rushed to me. I hugged her, feeling her thin body tremble. She smelled of soapy water and something else, a fear, an understanding that suddenly pierced me. "I brought you a new book, Sunshine." I pulled it out of the bag. "It's about dinosaurs, just like you like." Lily's eyes widened, and she took the book carefully, as if it were something fragile and precious. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered. "Lily, you're not done cleaning yet," Frank reminded her as he entered the kitchen. I straightened up and looked my son hard in the eye. "I think she's done enough. Why don't Lars or Melissa finish this?" Frank frowned. "Mom, we decide how we divide the chores in our house." "Yes." I crossed my arms over my chest. "Then explain to me why a 6-year-old is cleaning the kitchen while teenagers are lazing around, and why you're yelling at her so loudly she can be heard on the street." Frank's face hardened. Lily stepped back, clutching the book to her chest. "Lily, go to your room," Frank said, without taking his eyes off me. My granddaughter looked at me uncertainly, and I nodded. "Go on, sweetie. I'll come up to you a little later." As the small footsteps faded up the stairs, Frank took a deep breath. "Mom, I don't see the problem. Kids are supposed to help around the house. You're the one who taught us tidiness." "I taught you tidiness, not servitude," I retorted. "And I never yelled at you the way you yelled at Lily, even when you really deserve to be punished." "You're exaggerating." Frank waved dismissively. "It was just a raised tone." "I heard everything, Frank. And I saw Lars and Melissa laughing at her. Why did you let that happen?" My son turned away, opened the refrigerator, and pulled out a carton of orange juice. His movements were tense. Kids always make fun of each other. That's normal. That's not making fun. That's bullying. I didn't back down. "And you're encouraging it with your inaction." Frank set the glass down on the table with a clink. "Mom, I appreciate your concern, but don't interfere with how we raise our children. We have our own system." "A system?" I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. "Lily lives like Cinderella, while her stepbrother and stepsister live like a prince and princess." "That's your system. You're being dramatic." He rolled his eyes. And in that gesture, I recognized Lars's teenage mannerisms. Lily just helps out a bit around the house, and it's good for her. I opened my mouth to object, but just then Melissa came into the kitchen. "Dad, Lars and I are going to the mall." "You promised us money for new sneakers." Frank immediately changed his tone. His voice became gentle. "Sure, princess. Take my wallet from my jacket." There should be enough in there. Melissa ran to her father and gave him a kiss on the cheek. Then she ran out of the kitchen. I heard her call her brother. He said yes. Interesting, I remarked. For some kids, you have money for sneakers, but for others, you don't even buy regular clothes. Frank turned to me sharply. Stop it, Mom. You don't know the whole situation. Lily gets everything she needs. Necessities, yes. But what about attention? Love, equal treatment? Doris's kids just need more attention right now. It's a difficult transition. Lily is easier. She's quiet. She's quiet because she's intimidated. I shook my head. Don't you see what's happening in your own house? At that moment, Lars came into the kitchen, already dressed to go out, with his new smartphone in his hand. Dad, we're heading out. We'll be back for dinner. Okay, don't spend all the money on stupid stuff. Frank smiled at him. And watch out for your sister. Sure. Lars didn't even look in my direction as he left the kitchen. Isn't Lily coming with you? I asked, although I knew the answer. Why? Frank was genuinely surprised. She'd be bored there. Maybe she'd like new things too, or just to spend time with her family. Frank sighed with obvious irritation. Mom, stop it. Lily will have a great time at home with a new book. She doesn't like loud places at all. I doubted anyone had asked her opinion, but I decided to change tactics. Speaking of money, you mentioned work is going well? Yes, Frank nodded, clearly happy to change the subject. I'm hoping for a promotion by the end of the summer. That's great, I smiled. Then you'll soon be able to manage without my help with the mortgage. My son's smile faded. Well, not right away. The raise will be gradual. I see, I nodded. Are new sneakers, smartphones, trips to the coast all part of this gradual process? Frank turned purple. Are you monitoring my expenses? No, I'm just watching, and I don't like what I see. Frank, you're using my money to spoil your wife's children while keeping your own daughter as a servant. That's not true, he raised his voice. I love all my children equally. Then why have I never seen you hug Lily? Kiss her, ask her how she's doing in school? But you call Melissa princess and give her money whenever she asks. Frank looked away, his shoulders tense. You don't understand. Doris is very sensitive about how I treat her kids. It's been hard for them since the divorce, especially for Lars. His father is barely in their lives. What about Lily? It's hard for her, too. She feels like she doesn't belong in her own family. That's absurd. Frank waved it off. Lily is perfectly fine. She's just a quiet kid. At that moment, the front door opened, and I heard Doris's voice. I'm home. I got to leave early. She appeared in the kitchen, still in her work clothes, a prim blouse and skirt. Her face changed when she saw me. Evelyn, I didn't know you were coming today. It's a spontaneous visit, I replied. I wanted to spend time with my granddaughter. Doris smiled, but her eyes remained cold. That's nice. Lily will be happy. She's always asking about you. Does she? I didn't hide my surprise. I didn't think anyone in this house cared much about her opinion. An awkward silence fell. Doris looked at Frank, who shook his head slightly. Was something wrong? She asked cautiously. Mom thinks we're mistreating Lily, Frank said sharply. Doris's face changed instantly. Her eyebrows shot up. Her mouth opened in feigned shock. What? That's a misunderstanding. We love Lily. She's our child. Then why is she doing chores while the other kids are having fun? I asked bluntly. Doris fixed her hair, a gesture I noticed she made when she was nervous. Evelyn, you're misunderstanding the situation. We're just teaching her to be tidy. Lars and Melissa help too. They just have more classes and activities after school. Like going to the mall for new sneakers? I raised an eyebrow. Doris shot a quick glance at Frank. That was planned a long time ago. Melissa has outgrown her sneakers and Lars has a competition coming up. Does Lily also get new shoes? Or new books, toys, gadgets? She has everything she needs, Doris said firmly. We don't spoil the children. Except for Lars and Melissa. I didn't back down. I just saw Frank give them money for entertainment while Lily had to clean the kitchen. Lily was sitting at a tiny desk, bent over a notebook. The room looked Spartan. A narrow bed, a small closet, a bookshelf, no posters, minimal toys, a stark contrast to Lars's and Melissa's rooms, which were filled with gadgets and posters. Show me your math homework. I sat down next to her. Lily pushed the notebook toward me. The usual first-grade addition and subtraction problems. Everything was correct. There are no mistakes here, I said. You're doing great. I know, she replied quietly. But Mom always double-checks everything. I studied my granddaughter's thin face. She had gotten even paler in 2 months, with shadows under her eyes. Not the condition you'd expect in a 6-year-old. How's school, little girl? I stroked her head. Good, she shrugged. The teacher says I read well. And your friends? Lily was silent for a moment. Not very many, she finally admitted. But there's Abby. We sit at the same table. She's nice. That's good, I smiled. And at home? How do you get along with Lars and Melissa? Her face immediately closed off. It's fine, she lowered her eyes. They're older. They have their own things to do. Something told me that their own things didn't explain the tension I perceived. You know, I brought you something. I pulled a small box from my purse. Open it. Inside was a silver pendant in the shape of a crescent moon with a star on it. It was nothing special, but I saw Lily's eyes light up. Is this for me? She asked in disbelief. For you. I fastened the chain around her neck. It's a lucky charm. When you're sad or scared, you can touch it and remember that your grandmother is always with you. Lily wrapped her arms around me, and I felt her tremble. Thank you, she whispered. We sat together for another half hour. I told her about my trip, about the dinosaur museum I had visited so I could describe it to my granddaughter. Lily listened with wide eyes, soaking in every word. It seemed to me she was coming alive, becoming the curious girl I remembered. The front door slammed downstairs. Frank was back. I heard my son's loud voice greeting Doris, then the sound of stomping feet. Apparently, Melissa and Lars had come down to say hi to their father. Let's go downstairs. I took Lily's hand. Your dad is back. In the living room, the atmosphere had changed. Frank, still in his work clothes, sat on a chair, and Lars was showing him something on a tablet. Melissa hovered nearby, showing off her new headphones. Doris stood in the kitchen doorway with a satisfied smile. Mom! Frank stood up when he saw me. What a surprise. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? He hugged me and I could smell the expensive cologne. Another unexpected expense for a man who could barely make ends meet. I thought I'd surprise you, I smiled. How's work? Better and better, he said cheerfully. I'm expecting a promotion in a few months. Then we can talk about paying back your investment in our house soon. Investment, he called it now. Not a rescue, not a loan, but an investment, as if I were expecting a return. Take your time. I shook my head. Just get back on your feet first. Oh, I'm almost there. He winked. Doris, is dinner ready? I'm starving. In 10 minutes, dear. Doris disappeared into the kitchen. I noticed that Lily had been standing next to me the whole time, holding my hand tightly. Frank hadn't even said hello to his daughter. Dad, look what my grandmother gave me. Lily shyly showed the pendant. Frank glanced at it. That's a nice little trinket. He turned back to Lars. So, what about your new level in the game? Lily's shoulders slumped. I felt a pang of pain for her. My son had always been somewhat self-centered, but I hadn't expected such neglect. At dinner, I observed the family dynamics. Frank and Doris animatedly discussed their upcoming vacation. Lars and Melissa interrupted each other while talking about school and friends. Lily ate silently, not lifting her eyes from her plate. No one spoke to her. No one asked her questions. She was like a ghost at the table. How are you doing in school, Lily? I asked when there was a pause. It was as if everyone remembered she existed. She's struggling in math, Frank answered in his daughter's place. Her teacher says she needs to study more. But I checked her homework, and it's all correct, I countered. Then she's finally getting smart, Doris snorted. Last week she got an F. It wasn't an F, it was a B, Lily said quietly. Just one mistake. Don't contradict your mother, Frank interrupted her. I noticed how Melissa and Lars exchanged knowing glances. Something was definitely wrong in this family, and my granddaughter was at the center of the problem. After dinner, Frank offered me a brandy. We sat in the living room while Doris put the children to bed. How are you really doing, Mom? My son asked. Aren't you lonely in that big house? I'm used to it, I shrugged. I have a book club, gardening, and I sometimes help out at the local library. You could sell the house and move into a smaller apartment, Frank said casually. Or even move in with us. We have a guest room. I looked at my son closely. There was clearly a financial interest behind the offer. I like my house, I said firmly. There are too many memories of your father to sell it. Frank pressed his lips together. Of course I understand. I just thought it would be easier for you. It's not that hard for me. I sipped my cognac. By the way, I noticed you have some new things. A coffee machine, a microwave, and Doris mentioned a vacation at the coast. Frank hesitated for a moment. Yeah, things have improved. Bonus at work, and Doris got a raise. I nodded, deciding not to mention the roof repair in March. That's good. Then you'll soon be able to manage without my help. Of course, Mom. He smiled broadly. It won't be long now. Just as I was about to leave, a small figure in pajamas appeared on the stairs. Lily came down and hugged me tightly. Come back tomorrow, Grandma, she whispered. I will, darling. I kissed her forehead. Doris appeared from the kitchen, looking at her daughter sternly. Lily, you should be in bed. Go upstairs. The girl gave me one last look and hurried off. On the way home, I thought about what I had seen. The beautiful facade of a prosperous family concealed something unpleasant. My son and his wife were living beyond their means, spending my money on their whims, and my granddaughter. Something was categorically wrong with the way they treated Lily. At home, I sat in the armchair by the window, where George usually sat when he was thinking about important things. What would you do, honey? I asked mentally. The answer came immediately, as if he were right next to me. What's right, Evelyn? You always know what's right. I decided to observe a little longer before jumping to conclusions, but my intuition told me that the situation was more serious than it seemed at first glance, and if my suspicions were confirmed, I would have to make some hard decisions. It had been a week since my return to Raytown. I had visited my son's family twice during that time, noticing small but disturbing details each time. Lily was always busy doing something around the house. Dusting, folding laundry, washing dishes. For a 6-year-old, this seemed strange. My own children had minimal chores at that age. Make the bed, put away toys, and not always successfully. Lars and Melissa, on the other hand, spent their time freely, playing video games or hanging out with friends. Their rooms could stay in chaos for days and no one reprimanded them. It bothered me, but I didn't interfere. Every family makes its own rules. This morning, I decided to stop by unannounced. Doris usually worked on Saturdays, and I hoped to spend time with Lily without her intrusive supervision. I bought a new book about dinosaurs. My granddaughter had an inexplicable passion for them, and a box of chocolates that Frank loved. The day was clear and sunny, as it often was in Raytown in late May. As I approached my son's house, I heard loud voices. The windows were open, probably because of the heat. I slowed down so as not to interrupt a family squabble. I told you to clean this place up this morning. Frank's voice sounded unusually harsh. Look at this mess. I tried, Dad, but Lars spilled the juice and I had to wipe the floor first. Lily's quiet voice trembled. I'm not interested in your excuses. Clean the kitchen now. Doris went to her husband and put her hand on his shoulder, a united front against me. Evelyn, we respect you, but raising them is our responsibility. We have our own system, and it's working. Lily is a happy, healthy child. Are you sure? I looked her straight in the eye. When was the last time you asked her if she's happy? Doris couldn't hold my gaze and turned to the stove. I think we all need to calm down, she said quietly. Let's have some tea. Frank, honey, could you get Lily? I'm sure she wants to show Grandma her new drawings. The falseness in her voice was almost palpable. She was trying to smooth over the conflict, to create the illusion of normality. I had seen this behavior in my clients when I worked as an accountant. People trying to hide financial fraud behind a friendly facade. I'll go up myself, I said, heading out of the kitchen. Mom, Frank grabbed my arm. Let's not make a big drama out of this. We're doing fine with the parenting. I pulled my arm free. I see how you're doing it, and I don't like it. As I climbed the stairs, I heard muffled voices from the kitchen. Doris was whispering something angrily to Frank. I knocked on the door of Lily's room. Come in. Her quiet voice sounded wary. Lily was sitting on the bed, leafing through the new book. Her fingers gently touched the colorful illustrations, as if afraid to damage them. "Do you like the book, darling?" I sat down next to her. "Very much," she nodded, "especially the Triceratops. It has such cool horns." I smiled and stroked her head. "Lily, I want you to know that you can always tell me if something is wrong, if something is bothering you or making you sad." She looked at me with a flash of fear in her eyes. "It's okay, Grandma." "I don't think so." I took her hand. "I think you're having a hard time. I saw how Dad yelled at you today." Lily lowered her head. "I just didn't have time to clean up." I tried, but Lars spilled the juice and said it was my fault. "And you had to clean up after him?" She nodded, still not looking up. "Does this happen often? They make you clean up and they don't help?" Lily was silent for a moment, then answered very quietly, "Mom says I have to be helpful because I live in their house." Something broke inside me. "Lily, this is your house. You're not a guest here, and you don't have to earn your place in the family." Her small shoulders trembled. I hugged her and she cuddled up to me. "Lars and Melissa say I'm not a real sister," she whispered, "that nobody wants me." "That's not true." I hugged her tightly. "You are very much wanted. I want you, and your parents want you." At that moment, the door opened, and Doris appeared with a forced smile. "There you are. I made hot chocolate. Lily, come down to the kitchen." I felt my granddaughter tense in my arms. "We'll sit here a little longer," I said calmly. "We're looking at a book about dinosaurs." "But the chocolate will get cold," Doris insisted. Her smile became even more fake. "Why don't you bring it up here, if it's not too much trouble?" I smiled back. "We're more comfortable here." Doris clearly wanted to object, but held back. "Fine, but don't be too long. Lily still has a reading lesson today." After she left, I turned to my granddaughter. "What kind of reading lesson?" "Mom gives me phonics books," Lily explained. "I have to read pages every day." "But you're already a good reader," I wondered. "Yes, but Mom says I have to be the best in the class." She shrugged. "Otherwise, I'll embarrass the family." That was the last straw. A 6-year-old shouldn't be afraid of embarrassing the family over phonics. She shouldn't feel like a servant in her own home, shouldn't have to think that nobody wants her. We spent another hour with Lily, looking at the book and talking about dinosaurs. She gradually relaxed, smiled, and even laughed. When I was about to leave, she hugged me tightly. "Come again, Grandma," she said. "I will, darling. And you know what? How about you come visit me for the whole day? We could bake cookies and watch cartoons." Her eyes lit up, but then they went blank. "Mom won't let me. I have homework and chores." "You leave that to me." I winked at her. "Everything will be fine." As I went downstairs, I found Frank and Doris in the living room. They were arguing quietly about something, but they stopped talking when they saw me. "I'm leaving," I said. "But I have a proposal. I'd like to take Lily for the whole day tomorrow." Doris opened her mouth to object, but Frank beat her to it. "Of course, Mom, that's a great idea. It's been a long time since you spent time together." I realized he just wanted to avoid further conflict, but that was fine with me. "Great. I'll pick her up tomorrow morning at 9. On the way home, I thought about everything I had seen and heard. The situation was worse than I had realized. My son and his wife had created a toxic environment where Lily was rejected, humiliated, and used. They were spending my money on entertainment for Doris's children, while my granddaughter wasn't even receiving basic attention and care. George always said, "Money is a tool, Evelyn. It can create or destroy." Now my money was supporting a system that was destroying a child's psyche. At home, I sat down at the table and pulled out a folder of financial documents. An agreement with the bank to co-finance my son's mortgage, statements from my account showing regular transfers, the title deeds to the house. There was a time for compromise and gentle talk, but that time was over. I could no longer allow this treatment of Lily. If financial support was the only leverage I had over my son, then I was going to use it. The day I spent with Lily only strengthened my resolve. She was like a different person when she was away from her family, laughing, chatting happily, running around my yard, and shouting excitedly. I didn't recognize this cheerful girl as the quiet, anxious child from Frank's house. We baked chocolate chip cookies, watched dinosaur cartoons, and did paper crafts. I took out an old photo album and showed her pictures of Frank as a baby. Lily stared in amazement at the smiling boy building sandcastles and riding a bike. "Is that really my dad?" she asked in disbelief, touching the pictures. "Yes, sweetheart. He was a very happy and sweet boy." "He gets angry a lot now," she said quietly. And that simple statement broke my heart. When it was time to go back, her face immediately clouded over. She gathered her new books and crafts and packed them neatly in her backpack. At the door of Frank's house, she hugged me tightly. "Thanks, Grandma. It was the best day ever." Doris greeted us with a strange smile and quickly took Lily upstairs to change after the walk. Frank wasn't home. "He's working on his day off," as my daughter-in-law explained. Back in my room, I dialed Harry Taylor's number. George and I had been friends with the Taylor family for over 30 years. Harry had been our family lawyer, helping with transactions, insurance, and taxes. After George's death, he had handled all the legal aspects of the estate. "Evelyn, what a pleasant surprise." Harry's voice sounded as cheerful as it did 20 years ago, even though he was already 70. "What can I do for you?" "I need advice, Harry. It's about financial obligations to my son." "Of course. When is a good time for us to meet?" We arranged to meet the next day at his office. Harry was semi-retired but maintained a small office in the law firm he had once founded. The morning was overcast. I wore a business suit, a habit from my working days. Serious decisions required the right mindset. I packed all the financial documents concerning Frank's house into a briefcase and made my way to downtown Raytown. Harry's office was in an old brick building on Maple Street. His secretary, Mrs. Peterson, seemed to have worked for him forever. She smiled welcomingly when she saw me. "Mrs. Hauser, it's been a long time since you were here. Mr. Taylor is expecting you." Harry stood up from his desk as I entered his office. The years had added gray streaks to his reddish hair, but his blue eyes were still piercing. "Evelyn, you look wonderful." He hugged me. "How are you?" "Not bad, Harry, but there's a situation that needs to be resolved." We sat down in the leather chairs at his desk. I pulled out a file. "It's about Frank's house. You remember? I helped with the down payment 5 years ago?" "Of course I remember. We signed an agreement with the bank. I've been paying 2/3 of the mortgage payment every month since then." I showed him the bank statements. It was a temporary solution until Frank got back on his feet. But things have changed. I summarized what was happening in my son's house. The neglect of Lily, the privileged status of Doris's children, the inappropriate spending despite supposed financial difficulties. "So I've decided to stop the financing," I concluded. "I want to know what the legal implications might be." Harry listened attentively, looked at the documents, and then leaned back in his chair. "Legally, you don't have to continue the payments. The agreement with the bank lists you as a third party making the payments, but Frank is the primary borrower. If you stop the payments, he is fully responsible for repaying the loan. And if he can't pay, then the bank will initiate foreclosure proceedings. First warnings, late fees, then, if nothing changes, the auction of the house to settle the debt." He walked to the door but turned at the threshold. "I know you won't do it, Mom. You always said family was the most important thing." "That's why I'm doing this," I replied. "For Lily, who is also my family." When the door closed behind Frank, I sat still for a long time. Something told me this was just the beginning of a long, hard journey. But for the first time in years, I felt I was doing the right thing, even if it hurt. Sometimes you have to take a step back to see the big picture. And now that I had seen it, there was no turning back. 2 months passed in a strange silence. Frank didn't call, didn't visit. I didn't see Lily either, which worried me the most. I tried to visit her a few times, but Doris always found excuses to keep me out of the house. Lily was sick, or they were away, or she had tutoring. I called my granddaughter on the landline during the day when her parents were at work, but Lars or Melissa usually answered and said, "Lily is busy." Once I managed to speak with her for just a minute before Melissa took the phone away. Lily whispered, "Grandma, they won't let me see you." At the end of July, it was especially hot. I was working in the garden early in the morning, while the sun was still shining, when I noticed what looked like an official car driving slowly down the street. It stopped in front of Frank's house, and 2 men got out with files in their hands. Not police officers, but sheriff's deputies. I froze with the garden shears in my hand. The foreclosure proceedings had started so quickly. Usually, banks give more time before resorting to extreme measures. 20 minutes later, the deputies left and posted some kind of document on the door. Another hour later, I saw Frank rushing home. Apparently, he had been called home from work. He tore the paper from the door, read it quickly, and crumpled it up angrily. I decided to wait until he contacted me. The next day, the phone rang. "Mom," Frank's voice sounded depressed. "We need to talk." "Of course," I replied calmly. "Come over whenever you like." "I'll be there in an hour." He arrived even earlier. He looked thin. His eyes were shadowed, his shirt wrinkled. Nothing left of the confident man who had assured me 2 months ago that I wouldn't go through with it. "The bank has started foreclosure proceedings," he said without preamble, sinking into his chair. "They're auctioning the house in 3 weeks." I nodded and poured him tea. I assumed that would happen. "Did you miss payments?" "4." He rubbed his face. "I tried to negotiate a restructuring, but because of the second loan, they wouldn't budge." "I understand. What do you plan to do?" Frank looked at me tiredly. "What can we do? We don't have enough money to pay off the debts. We have to move out. Have you found another place to live?" Doris has her eye on an apartment on the north side. 2 bedrooms. Small, but it's all we can afford right now, he said quietly. "Mom, I came to ask for help." "Not with the house. I realize that's not possible anymore, but we need money for the first and last month's rent for the move. Just a few thousand." I looked at my son closely. He looked genuinely depressed and sincere. "What about Lily? How did she take the news about the move?" Frank looked away. "She's fine. Kids adapt faster than adults. But 2 bedrooms, where will she sleep? In the room with Melissa? Of course they'll get along." I doubted that, given Melissa's attitude toward her stepsister. "I need to see Lily," I said firmly. "I haven't given you any money this whole time because I wanted you to rethink your attitude toward her." "Has anything changed?" Frank sighed. "We're trying, Mom, but it's not a good time. We're all stressed about the move. That's why I want to see my granddaughter. She needs to know that I'm here for her in any situation." "Okay," he agreed reluctantly. "Come by tomorrow afternoon, we'll all be home packing." The next day, I approached Frank's house with a heavy heart. Something told me it wouldn't be easy. Doris's car was in the driveway, and next to it was a minivan with the logo Arts Moving Company. The move had already begun. Doris opened the door. Her face was tense, but she tried to smile. "Evelyn, come in, we're just packing." The house was a chaos. Boxes, bags, disassembled furniture. Lars and Melissa were sitting in the living room, staring at their gadgets, oblivious to what was happening around them. "Where's Lily?" I asked, without wasting time on small talk. "Upstairs in her room," Doris answered, helping her pack. Such a hard-working girl. I went up the stairs and found Lily, neatly folding her few clothes into a battered suitcase. When she saw me, she rushed to hug me. "I missed you so much." "I missed you too, darling." I hugged her tightly, feeling her little heart pound. "How are you?" "I'm fine," she shrugged. "We're moving. Dad says the new apartment will be cramped, but there's a park nearby." "Are you looking forward to it?" Lily was silent for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "I don't know. Melissa is mad that she has to share a room with me. She said she'd throw my stuff out if I take up too much space." My heart clenched. Nothing had changed. Still the same bullying, still the same neglect. "What about your school? Can you still go to school there?" "No." Her face grew sad. "Dad said I'm going to a new school. But Abby, my best friend, won't be there." At that moment, Doris came into the room with a cheerful smile. "Lily, honey, come downstairs. Dad wants to talk to you about the new school." My granddaughter nodded obediently and went to the door, giving me one last look. When we were alone, Doris's smile vanished. "Frank said you came to offer help." Her tone became businesslike. "Was that true?" "I came to see Lily," I replied, "and to assess the situation." "As you can see, it's not a pleasant situation." Doris looked around the room. "We're losing the house because of your decision." "Frank's decision to take out a loan he couldn't repay," I corrected. And because of your mutual decision to spend money on luxuries instead of necessities. Doris pressed her lips together. That's in the past. Right now we need help, and so does Lily. She's the one I'm most worried about. I crossed my arms over my chest. How has she been living the last 2 months? Why didn't you let me see her? We were upset about your decision. Doris shrugged. That's a natural reaction. Using a child as a tool for revenge is not a natural reaction, I countered. That's manipulation. Doris suddenly changed tactics. Her face softened, a pleading tone in her voice. Evelyn, let's be honest, we all make mistakes. Maybe we weren't always fair to Lily. But things are really hard for us right now, and Lily is suffering the most. New school, cramped apartment, sharing a room with Melissa, who admittedly isn't always nice to her. I listened carefully, trying to figure out what she was getting at. What are you suggesting? Maybe. Doris hesitated, as if she were just thinking of an idea, although I was sure it had all been planned in advance. Maybe Lily could stay with you for a while, until we get back on our feet. It would be better for everyone. She would have her own room, a familiar school, and it would be easier for us to fit into the small apartment. So that was it. They had decided to use Lily as bait to get money from me. How long will it take to get back on your feet? I asked. Well, Doris made a vague gesture with her hand. Until we find a bigger place, maybe a few months. And you expect me to support Lily the whole time? Pay for her expenses, her school fees, her clothes? That would be very helpful, Doris smiled. Well, in every way possible. Of course, I thought. It was tempting to take Lily in, to give her a normal life. But I didn't trust Doris's and Frank's motives. I had to discuss this with my son. I went downstairs and found Frank in the study, sorting papers. Doris suggested that Lily stay with me, I said without preamble. Frank nodded, unsurprised. Yes, we discussed that possibility. It makes sense in our situation. What about the legal side? Are you willing to agree to a temporary guardianship? He frowned. Guardianship? Why so formal? It's just a temporary solution. If Lily is going to live with me, I need to have the right to make decisions about her education, her health, her safety, I explained. Without legal guardianship, that's impossible. Frank was silent for a moment, thinking about the situation. Okay, if it makes you feel better, but it has to be a temporary guardianship, and we retain the right to see our daughter anytime. Of course you do. I would never interfere with your communication, I assured him. There's one more issue. If Lily lives with me, I will provide for her completely, but I will not give you any money. Frank's face darkened. So you'll take our daughter, but refuse to help us with the apartment. I'm not taking her, Frank. I'm offering her stability while you sort out your problems. Doris suggested this, and I agree, but I am not financing your lifestyle. You know we don't even have money for a security deposit for the apartment. Sell Doris's car, I suggested, or Lars's electronics, or the jewelry you bought your wife. You have enough valuable things to raise the money you need. Frank slammed his fist on the table. You're doing this on purpose. You're punishing us. No, son. I've just stopped enabling your bad habits. I sighed. Think about the offer. Lily will be better off with me until you get your life in order. She won't have to change her school, her friends, her surroundings, and you'll have the chance to focus on solving your financial problems. He was silent for a long time, then nodded slowly. Okay, but only temporarily. And we'll visit her every weekend. I nodded. That was exactly the answer I had expected. There's something else. Harry leaned forward. While you were talking, I ran a background check on the address. Frank took out an additional loan on the house 8 months ago, a rather large sum. I froze, processing the information. A home equity loan? But he hadn't even paid off the original mortgage. Yes, but there was already equity in the house thanks to your down payment and regular payments. Banks often issue a second mortgage against that equity. And what was this money used for? I felt anger rising in me. Harry shrugged. I can't tell you that. But judging by the amount, about $50,000, it wasn't for a roof repair. I remembered Doris's new car, the vacation at the coast, the expensive gadgets for the kids. It all added up, and I knew nothing about it. I shook my head. Even though I've been making the payments on the first mortgage. He didn't have to tell you, Harry said. Legally, he owned the house, but I'm the one actually paying for a large part of it. I sat up straight. Well, that settles things, Harry. I need a legally sound way to stop financing the house. Harry nodded. The easiest way is to notify the bank that you are stopping the additional payments for the loan of Frank Hauser. I will prepare a formal letter for you. I also recommend you change the automatic payment setup at your bank. What happens to Frank and his family? They will have a choice. Either they find a way to pay the full amount of the mortgage themselves, sell the house and pay off the debts, or they wait for the bank to initiate foreclosure proceedings. In the latter case, the house would be auctioned off, most likely below market value. The debts would be settled, and the remaining balance, if any, would be paid out to Frank. I thought about it. The situation was unpleasant, but I saw no other way. As long as my son was financially dependent on me, he had no incentive to change. Prepare the letter, Harry. One more thing, regarding my will. We spent another hour in Harry's office discussing the details. When I left, my heart was heavy, but I felt relieved about the decision I had made. At the bank, I canceled the automatic transfer of money to Frank's mortgage account. Then I decided it was best not to postpone speaking with my son. I called him on his cell phone. Mom, is something wrong? He sounded surprised. I rarely called him during work hours. We need to talk, Frank. It's important. Can you come by my place after work? Today is complicated. Doris and I have plans tonight. Cancel them. My tone left no room for argument. I'll see you at 6. There was a pause. Okay, he finally answered. But what's going on? We'll talk then, Frank. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for the conversation. I brewed strong tea and took out cookies. The usual ritual for serious conversations in our family. At 6, I heard Frank's car pull up. My son came in with a tired expression. I pointed to the chair across from me. Sit down, T. What's wrong, Mom? He ignored the offer. You sound like something terrible has happened. Not terrible. I poured myself a cup of tea. But it is serious. I have decided to stop financing your house. Frank froze, then grinned nervously. What do you mean, stop the financing? Exactly what I said. I will not be making any more payments on your mortgage. Starting this month, you are fully responsible for your own payments. He stared at me as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. But why? What happened? What happened is that I've opened my eyes. I sipped my tea. I've seen how you treat Lily. I've seen you yell at her. Watched Lars and Melissa bully her. How Doris makes a 6-year-old do chores while her kids have fun. Frank's face darkened. You're starting with that again. I told you. We're just teaching her responsibility. No, Frank. You're making her a servant. And you're using my money to spoil the other children. That's not true. He raised his voice. We treat all the kids equally. Do you? I raised an eyebrow. Then explain to me why Lars has a new smartphone and a bike. Melissa has a swim club membership and stylish clothes. And Lily has hand-me-down t-shirts that are too small for her. Why do they go to the mall and she stays home doing homework? Why do they go on vacation with you? And she gets left with her grandmother. Frank looked away. You don't understand. Everyone has different needs. Lars needs a phone to stay in touch with friends. Melissa needs swimming lessons for her health. And Lily, she's a homebody. She's a homebody because you don't give her any other choice. I shook my head. But it's more than that. I found out about the second loan you took out on the house. Frank flinched, his eyes widening. How did you... It doesn't matter. What matters is that you took out a large sum of money without saying a word to me, while I'm paying the bulk of your first mortgage. And from what I see, Doris's new car, vacations, electronics, that money didn't go toward necessities. We had debts, Frank began uncertainly. Credit cards, the kids' tuition. Lars and Melissa's, I clarified. Not Lily's, she goes to a regular public school. Frank jumped up from his seat. Are you stalking us? Counting our money? No, I looked at him calmly. I'm just observing, and I don't like what I see. You're using my money to live beyond your means, and you're mistreating my granddaughter. That's not fair, he exclaimed. You can't just refuse to help like that. I can. I put the cup on the table. And I already have. I've canceled the automatic payment at the bank and sent a notification to the mortgage company. As of the 1st of next month, the payments are all yours. Frank turned pale. You won't do it. I've already done it. But But we can't afford the full amount. There was panic in his voice. We don't have enough money. Then you'll have to reconsider your expenses. I shrugged. Buy less, spend less on entertainment, live like normal people on a budget. Frank ran his hand through his hair, a gesture he always made when he was nervous. Mom, you can't do this to us. We could lose the house. Yes, that's a possibility, I agreed. If you can't find a way to pay the mortgage yourself. And you don't care if your grandchildren end up on the street? I care that one of my grandchildren is being humiliated in her own home, I said firmly. And I don't think you'll end up on the street. At the very least, you can sell the house and buy something more affordable, or rent an apartment. Frank stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. I don't recognize you, Mom. You've never been so cruel. This isn't cruelty, Frank. It's justice. I've closed my eyes to what's been happening for too long. It's time we all face the truth. He sank back into his chair, shoulders slumped. What do you want? He asked quietly. For me to apologize? Okay. I've been too hard on Lily. I'll make it right. This isn't about apologizing. I shook my head. It's about you letting your new family push your own daughter aside. You're using my money to give your wife's children privileges, while Lily lives like Cinderella. That's an exaggeration. No, Frank. I've seen it with my own eyes, and the decision has already been made. My son suddenly changed tactics. His face softened, and a pleading look came into his eyes, an expression I knew from his childhood when he wanted a new toy or wanted to stay out late with friends. Mom, let's be reasonable. Maybe we could find a compromise. I promise to pay more attention to Lily. Make sure Lars and Melissa treat her better. Doris will try her best too. We'll fix this. I'm sure you will. I nodded, especially now that your financial well-being depends on it. But my decision stands. Frank clenched his fists. You can't do this to us. After everything we've been through, after Dad died, I was there for you. You visited me once a month, Frank, I said quietly. That hardly qualifies as being there for me, and I've always managed my own finances, you know that. He stood up and paced the room nervously. It's Prudence, isn't it? Did she turn you against me during your visit? Always Dad's little girl, always trying to make me look bad. Your sister had nothing to do with this. I shook my head. It's my decision, based on what I've seen with my own eyes. Frank stopped abruptly. Okay, I understand your position, but I still don't think you'll go through with it. Mom, you're not that kind of person. You wouldn't abandon your family. I saw a strange confidence in his eyes. He truly didn't believe I was capable of such a decisive step. In his mind, I was still the soft, compliant mother who would eventually give in and keep helping no matter what. Don't test me, Frank, I said quietly. I love you. You're my son, but I will no longer support what is happening in your house. He smirked, and in that smirk, I saw condescension. Okay, Mom, you've made your point. I heard you. Let's revisit this conversation in a week, when everyone has calmed down. He was so sure this was just an emotional outburst on my part, a temporary threat that wouldn't be realized. That self-assurance strengthened my resolve. Nothing will change in a week, Frank. The automatic payment has been canceled. The notification has been sent to the bank. You will receive the full mortgage bills, starting the 1st of the month. Whatever you say. He was still smiling, though a flicker of worry was in his eyes. I have to go. Doris is waiting. A week later, all the formalities were completed. Harry helped with the legal side, and I received temporary guardianship for Lily for 1 year, renewable. Frank signed the papers reluctantly, but he didn't have much choice. The new apartment was really tiny with 2 small bedrooms. Lily would have had to sleep on a cot in the corner of Melissa's room. My granddaughter's move to my place went surprisingly smoothly. She had so few things that everything fit into 1 suitcase and a backpack. I prepared the room that used to belong to Prudence for her. Bright, spacious, with a view of the garden. I bought a new bed, a desk, bookshelves. When Lily saw her new room, her eyes widened in surprise. This is all for me? She asked in disbelief. It's all yours, sweetheart. I put my arm around her shoulders. You can decorate it however you want. The first few days weren't easy. Lily often woke up crying at night, calling for her dad. I sat with her, cuddled her, told her stories. Gradually, she calmed down, got used to it. She started to smile more, to speak louder, to laugh. Frank and Doris visited her that first weekend, as promised. They brought a new doll, obviously expensive, in a fancy dress. Lily thanked them politely, but I noticed she wasn't particularly happy about the gift. Later, she confessed to me that she never liked dolls. She preferred books and puzzles. They don't even know what you like, I thought bitterly. The visit was tense. Lars and Melissa stayed home, doing homework, as Doris explained. Frank was quiet, answering his daughter's questions about the new apartment with monosyllabic answers. Doris tried to create the appearance of a normal family interaction, but it seemed artificial. 3 weeks after Lily moved in with me, I decided to finalize my will. A notary appointment was set for Tuesday morning. Harry was there too. He helped me set up the document so that everything was legally sound. Now, Mrs. Hauser, the notary, an older man with a neat beard, looked at me closely. Do you wish to change your will and leave your entire estate to your granddaughter, Lily Hauser? Yes, I confirmed, but on the condition that the inheritance is held in a trust until she comes of age. Harry Taylor will be the trustee of the trust. I understand. What about your children, Frank and Prudence Hauser? Prudence will receive a part of my jewelry collection that belonged to my mother, I explained. These have sentimental value for her. Frank will get his father's watch and cufflinks. Everything else, the house, the bank accounts, the investments, will go into a trust for Lily. The notary nodded and took notes. And you are sure of your decision? It could be contested in court by your son. Let him try. I smiled. I have every reason to distribute the inheritance this way, and Harry will help me prove it if necessary. The will was signed, witnessed, and officially registered. Harry kept a copy in his office, and I kept another in my possession. I had not intended to inform Frank about the change to the will, but fate had other plans. That same afternoon, he came by unexpectedly, supposedly to pick up some of Lily's papers he had forgotten to hand over. My granddaughter was at school, so it was just the two of us. The two of us. I offered him tea, and we sat in the kitchen talking about everyday things. The weather, health, news from Raytown. Frank looked tense, but he was polite. My briefcase with the documents from the notary was on the table. I hadn't had time to put it away since I returned. What's that? Frank nodded at the folder labeled Will. My personal papers. I tried to move the briefcase away, but my son was faster. You changed the will. He pulled the folder out, opened it. Frank, that's none of your business. I held out my hand. Please give it back. But he was already looking at the document. His face changed with every line he read. What does this mean? He looked at me with darkened eyes. You're leaving everything to Lily, and just my father's watch to me. I am entitled to dispose of my property as I see fit, I replied calmly. And I have decided that Lily needs the most protection and support. Frank threw the folder on the table. You're disinheriting me over a petty grudge? After everything I've done for you? What exactly have you done, Frank? I looked him straight in the eye. Exploited my money for years. Let your wife and her children abuse my granddaughter. Taken out loans I knew nothing about. I am your son, he exclaimed, jumping up from his chair. I am your flesh and blood, and you're treating me like a stranger. You made this choice, Frank. I shook my head. When you decided that your new family was more important than your own daughter, when you allowed Lily to become a servant, when you spent my money on luxuries instead of giving your child a normal life. I won't allow this, he slammed his fist on the table. I will contest the will. On what grounds? I raised an eyebrow. On the grounds that I decided to take care of my granddaughter instead of a grown man who can't manage his own finances? Frank turned black with anger. You always loved Prudence more, always put her above me. And now you've found a new favorite, Lily. That's not true, Frank. I shook my head. I loved you both equally, and I still do. But love doesn't mean enabling selfishness and irresponsibility. I don't want to hear your moral lectures anymore. He grabbed his jacket. You betrayed me, Mom. First, you took my house, then my daughter. Now you're disinheriting me. What's next? Next, you'll grow up and start taking responsibility for your actions, I said calmly. And maybe then you'll remember that you have a daughter who needs her father. I have 3 children, he shouted. Not just Lily. But only one is your own flesh and blood, I reminded him. And she's the one you abandoned. Frank threw me one last angry look and stormed out of the kitchen. The front door slammed, and his car engine roared. I remained sitting at the table, staring at the scattered papers. This was the end, I knew it. Frank wouldn't forgive me for this blow to his ego, but for the first time in a long time, I felt I had done the right thing. Lily deserved a better life, and I was determined to give it to her, no matter what her father thought of it. It has now been a year that I've had the sound of a child's laughter in my house. Sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I don't immediately remember that I'm no longer alone, and the sounds in the kitchen aren't coming from George making his typical omelet, but from Lily trying to surprise me with a cup of tea and toast with jam. The year has flown by. The temporary guardianship has long since turned into a permanent one. Frank didn't object when it was time to renew the papers. He and Doris moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of Raytown, in a neighborhood the locals called Up and Coming. They visited Lily twice a month. At first, both of them, then increasingly Frank alone. Their marriage was cracking. That was obvious even in their brief encounters. Doris blamed her husband for the loss of their home and their status. He accused her of wastefulness. Lars, now 15, was constantly getting into trouble at his new school. Melissa withdrew, quit swimming. I did not gloat. I felt sorry for them. But I recognized that this whole situation was a logical consequence of their own choices and actions. What really made me happy was the change in Lily. At first, she was suspicious, quiet, afraid to ask for anything, often woke up at night screaming. I had to sit by her bed for a long time and assure her that no one would yell at her if she spilled juice or didn't have time to clean her room. Gradually, her shell began to break. One morning, I heard her humming while watering the flowers on the windowsill. Another time, I caught her dancing in front of the mirror with a hairbrush for a microphone. Small things, but they spoke volumes. Lily had always been a capable student in school, but now her grades were even better. The teacher, Mrs. Wagner, noted at the parent-teacher conference that the girl was participating more actively in discussions, raising her hand, coming to the board. "It's as if she has spread her wings," the teacher said, and I could only agree. I decided to support my granddaughter's development and offered her a choice of additional activities. "Anything, as long as she enjoyed it. Can I really do anything?" she asked in disbelief. "Of course, sweetheart. Sports, art, science. What interests you?" Lily thought, playing with the crescent moon pendant she had worn ever since I gave it to her. "I want to learn to play the piano," she said quietly. "We were shown a concert at school, and it was so beautiful." I enrolled her in Mrs. Fisher's music school, an old woman with a tuft of gray hair and kind eyes. After a month of lessons, she called me. "Mrs. Hauser, your granddaughter has an amazing ear," she said excitedly. "This is a natural talent. She picks everything up on the fly and is already playing pieces that take my other students 6 months." I wasn't surprised. Lily had always loved music, humming tunes she heard on the radio, drumming rhythms with her fingers on the table. But in Frank and Doris's house, there was no room to develop this talent. I bought a used piano from neighbors who were moving to Florida. Lily loved it, sat at the instrument for hours, learning scales and simple pieces. Her small fingers flew over the keys with amazing dexterity. After 6 months of lessons, the first recital took place. I sat in the music school's hall and watched my granddaughter, in a simple blue dress we had chosen together, walk onto the stage. She bowed, sat down at the piano, and the music flowed. A simple piece by Schumann, but in her performance it sounded particularly poignant. I had invited Frank to the concert, but he didn't come. He called at the last minute, citing a work emergency. I saw Lily scanning the audience before the performance, looking for her father, and her eyes went blank when she didn't find him. But on stage, she pulled herself together and played flawlessly. Then, as we walked home, she held my hand tightly and talked about music, about which piece she wanted to learn next. Not a word about her father. Frank's visits became rarer. Once a month, then once every 2 months. He always brought gifts, expensive but impersonal. Dolls that Lily didn't play with. Dresses that were too fancy for everyday wear. One day he brought a giant teddy bear that took up half her room. "Thanks, Dad," she said politely. But I could see she felt uncomfortable. Frank didn't know his daughter. Her taste, her hobbies, her dreams. He bought gifts that he thought a 7-year-old girl should like, without realizing that Lily was not an ordinary child. She preferred books about dinosaurs over Barbie dolls, encyclopedias over fashion magazines, classical music over cartoons. On her 8th birthday, we threw a small party. We invited a few girls from her class, including Abby, her best friend. We ordered a piano-shaped cake and decorated the house with balloons. Lily beamed with happiness as she received congratulations and gifts. Frank arrived with Doris, the first time in a long time they had been together. They seemed strangely polite to each other, said Little. They gave Lily the latest model of a tablet, which was too expensive for their current situation. I noticed how Doris looked around the house, noting every detail, every change I had made in the last year. Her gaze was assessing, as if she were estimating the value of everything she saw. After the party, when the children had left and Lily had gone upstairs to sort her gifts, Frank asked to speak with me alone. We went into the garden and sat on a bench under an old apple tree. "Mom, I want to apologize," he began, looking away. "For everything that happened. For my behavior." I looked at my son closely. He had changed a lot in the last year. Gray at the temples, new wrinkles around his eyes, and a faded look in his eyes. "I'm glad to hear that, Frank," I said calmly. "Lily needs a father who recognizes his mistakes and wants to fix them." "Yes, of course," he nodded. "But I'm not just talking about Lily. I want to rebuild our relationship. Mom, we're family, no matter what. Has something changed in your life?" I asked bluntly. Frank hesitated, then sighed. "Doris and I are separating. She's taking the kids and moving to her sister's in Seattle. I'm sorry," I said sincerely, "but I can't say I'm surprised." "Yeah," he smirked bitterly. "I guess you always saw things I didn't. Doris, she's not who I thought she was." I said nothing. There was no point in stating the obvious, that Doris had only ever been interested in money and status, that she had used him to support herself and her children. "It's going to be hard for me alone," Frank continued. "Financially, I mean. The apartment is in my name. The furniture is mine. But my salary barely covers the bills. That's all." I had expected this conversation to come around to money sooner or later. "What are you suggesting?" I asked neutrally. Maybe I could move in here with you?" He looked at me hopefully. "Not forever, of course. Just until I get back on my feet, and Lily would be happy to see me every day." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to help my son. After all, he was still my child despite everything. But another part of me remembered everything that had happened in recent years. "No, Frank," I shook my head. "That's not a good idea. Lily is just starting to feel safe and gain trust. Your constant presence could disrupt that delicate balance." "But I'm her father," he said indignantly. "I have rights." "Of course you do, and I have never interfered with your communication with your daughter," I reminded him. "But living with us is different. You're not ready for that kind of responsibility yet." "You still don't trust me." He pressed his lips together. "You're still punishing me for past mistakes." "I'm not punishing you, Frank. I'm protecting Lily. And yes, I'm not sure if you've changed enough to put her interests before your own." My son's face contorted with anger. "You'll never give me a chance, will you? You're going to keep my daughter away from me until she completely forgets who her real family is." "Lily knows exactly who her family is," I replied calmly. "And you can always be a part of her life. Come visit, spend time together, take her on weekends, but live here? No." Frank stood up, clenching and unclenching his fists. "You'll regret this, Mom. I can still fight for custody." "On what grounds?" I stood up too. "You can't offer a child stability. You don't have a stable home. Your marriage is broken. Your finances are precarious. Any court would leave Lily with me." He knew I was right, and that made him even angrier. "Well, we'll talk more about this," he said, walking toward the house. After this conversation, Frank didn't get in touch for almost 3 months. Didn't call, didn't write. Lily asked about him, and I told her that Dad was very busy at work, but he would surely visit as soon as he could. She nodded with an understanding that broke my heart. An 8-year-old shouldn't accept the absence of a parent in her life so calmly. One evening, as we were sitting in the living room, me with my knitting, Lily at the piano, she suddenly interrupted her playing and turned to me. "Grandma, does Dad love me?" I put down my needles, came to her, and put my arm around her shoulders. "Of course he does, sweetheart. It's just that he doesn't always know how to show it." Lily thoughtfully ran her finger over the keys. When I lived with them, I often thought they'd be better off without me, that I was redundant. You were never redundant. I hugged her tighter. It's just that some adults don't realize what a treasure they have. She smiled and cuddled up to me. I'm glad I live with you, Grandma. You never make me feel redundant. I never will. I kissed her head. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. In September, I received a letter from Frank, a postcard from Chicago. He wrote that he had found a new job with an insurance company, moved to another state, and was starting his life over. He promised to call Lily every week and visit for Christmas. For the first 2 weeks, he actually called. Then the calls got shorter and shorter. At Christmas, he sent a package with gifts and apologies. He couldn't come. Too much work. Lily took the news stoically, as if she had expected nothing else. We spent the holidays alone, except for a visit from Prudence with her husband and children. We decorated the house, baked gingerbread, and went to the Christmas show at school. It was quiet, cozy, peaceful. In the new year, I decided we both needed a change of scenery. For too long, life had revolved around the problems Frank and Doris had caused. It was time to move on. How would you feel if we took a trip this summer? I asked Lily at breakfast. Her eyes widened. A real trip? Where to? Wherever you want. I smiled. We could go to Washington, D.C. and visit the museums, or to Denver. They have a great zoo and a natural history museum with real dinosaur skeletons. Or even... I paused. Europe. Lily jumped in her chair. Really? We could see the Eiffel Tower and the Colosseum and castles. Anything you want. I laughed, seeing her excitement. Pick a country, and we'll plan an itinerary. That same day, we went to the bookstore and bought a world atlas, guidebooks for Europe, and a notebook to plan the trip. Lily enthusiastically immersed herself in learning about the countries and sites, telling me something new every night about the places she wanted to visit. Seeing her so vibrant and happy, I thought about how long I had postponed my own travel dreams. First for my career, then for my family, then because of George's illness. Even after his death, I had continued to live a routine life, giving my money and time to Frank and his family. But now, I finally had the courage to change everything, to put Lily's well-being above the supposed comfort of adults, to stop funding unhealthy relationships, to take responsibility for the future of a child who trusted me. I guess that's true love, not giving in to weakness, but standing up for what's right. George would have approved of my decisions, I was sure of that. One evening, when Lily was already asleep, I went into the garden and looked at the stars. The spring air was cool but fresh, full of the promise of new life. We did it, George, I whispered, as if he could hear me. Our granddaughter is safe. She's happy. And in the rustling of the leaves of the old apple tree, I heard his voice. I knew you would make the right choice, Evelyn. I smiled and breathed in the scent of the first flowers. Summer was ahead. Travel, new discoveries for Lily and for me. Life went on, and for the first time in years, I looked to the future with joyful anticipation, instead of fear and a sense of obligation. Cinderella had found her home, and in this fairy tale, there was no room for a wicked stepmother and an indifferent father. Only love, music, and the promise of an adventure waiting beyond the horizon. If you like my story, you can encourage me to write more stories by sending me a donation. I thank you infinitely.